At 6'4", walking around the convention, people kind of see the cat first.
Here we go then.
There you go. Fantastic.
It's a cat sort of thing.
It's a cat sort of thing.
All right.
Right. Well, hello there.
Are we recording?
We are. We're up and running.
Good.
We're ready to go.
All right. I hope you're not going to edit any of that out.
I'll edit as little as possible.
Excellent.
How's that?
Excellent.
Hello there, Michael. Welcome
Hello.
along. This is the Convention Collective. My name is Leonard Sultana, and this is the Lakes International Comic Art Festival. And I'm here with artist extraordinaire Michael Lark. Thank you very much.
Extraordinaire.
Indeed.
Thank you.
I'm giving you that. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. I mean, the last time I came to Lakes was when Greg came here. And was that last year, year before?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. Were you due to come over with him as a kind of like a Lazarus double team, or?
No, actually, I believe at that point we were patrons of the con. My wife
right,
and I.
okay.
And that may have been the year before we began as patrons, but we arranged for Greg to come over with us.
Oh, right, okay.
We were already planning on coming. We came the first time here in 2019 when it was still in Kendall.
Indeed.
And immediately fell in love with it, and just kind of committed to ourselves that as long as they would have us, we were going to keep coming back. And
I mean, it's a pretty part of the world.
More than that, we really like the festival because it's run by women. It's very diverse. There's so many different kinds of comics represented here, and it's all about comics, which is so different from anything in the United States.
Yeah.
And I mean, we loved it so much we decided to move to the UK.
So, now that I didn't. Oh wow, that I didn't know.
Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, we've been living here since June. We live in Shrewsbury.
Okay, another pretty part of the world.
Yes, and there's quite a few comics artists that live in Shrewsbury.
Yes.
Actually, we're from Texas originally, and I actually know more comics artists in Shrewsbury than I knew in all of Texas.
Well, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, have you had the invite to Charlie Adlard's palatial?
We live within sight of Charlie's house. We live right across the river from him. The River Severn runs through the middle of Shrewsbury.
And then there's the moat and the gun turrets to keep everybody out.
Yeah, Charlie's on one side of the river, and were it not for a building in between our houses, we would be able to see their house from our front windows.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously being a pretty part of the world, and as you now know, is that something that influences your art? Because I mean, I know you came from a design background. Yeah. It's a little bit. It's very much more. You're dealing with very much structured routines when it comes to design and kind of keeping an idea of a structure. With you've got nature around you, you've got landscapes like this. Is that something that influences your art? And do you get the chance to do landscapes?
At some point, I would love to draw something that took place in a place that looked like Shrewsbury, but currently drawing Lazarus, it has no. I mean, unless I can talk Greg into doing some story arcs that take place in small towns, smallish towns in the UK, I don't think that I'll get a chance to draw stuff like that. So, and I'm sort of a hobbit. I stay in my hobbit hole and draw comics, and I walk out to maybe go get a coffee, every couple of days. But other than that, I rarely leave the house because I'm drawing so much.
What is your kind of work? I love asking this question, especially of professional artists. What is your kind of like work routine? Do you have kind of like a 9 to 5 where you separate that work life and get the chance to kind of?
Yes, absolutely. We have 3 floors at our house, and I work on the top floor, and that's the only thing that goes on the top floor.
Right.
Aside from the cats hanging out. I go up there to work in the morning and come down before dinner time, and sometimes I'll come down to go make lunch or go run an errand or go get coffee or something, but I actually prefer not to do that. I tend to get up, make my coffee, go straight into the office and start drawing, and except, as I say, to go grab something to drink or grab a meal, I don't leave the office all day. I prefer to kind of get in that mindset and stay in it.
Sure.
I know a lot of people, it's important for them to take breaks during the day and, go turn their brains off of work for a while. But for me, that slows everything down. If I do that. I work better. Once I get into that zone, I kind of need to stay there until I'm finished.
Sure. Okay. I mean, the importance to stand up and stretch every once in a while, obviously, is...
Yeah, as I'm getting older, I probably should do that more, but I let the legs get stiff, and I get up at the end of the day and I'm like, oh, walking down the stairs is kind of a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. When it came to participating with the lakes as well, I mean, I want to talk about the lakes. I love the festival.
Yes, let's talk about the lakes as much as possible.
Because when it came to getting initially involved with the lakes, because I know that you're a huge fan of Sean Phillips, of course,
yep.
The local lad. Was it that kind of connection that got you into meeting up and connecting with Julian Carroll?
It was Charlie. Charlie Adler. He and I were exchanging emails about something else entirely, and he said, "Well, when are you going to come over to the UK for a show?" And I was like, whenever someone invites me. And I think less than an hour later, I got an email from Julian Carroll asking me to come. And at the time, I didn't realize how involved in this festival Charlie was. But I guess all it took was one word from Charlie, and I was invited. And as I said, my wife and I just immediately fell in love with it. And
your thoughts about change of location, coming to Windermere? It's a little bit more widescreen.
We only did 1 year at Kendall, so it's kind of hard to say because as soon as we went in 2019, then of course COVID hit, and so we didn't come back for the next 2 years. And once we came back, it was here. So this has kind of become home for us. It's not the new place for us, and but we love it. I mean, we love coming over here. Now that we live here, it's a nice chance for us to come up to the Lakes District,
sure.
And we love this festival so much. It is the most enjoyable festival that I've ever been to. Just as far as being here as a professional, it's fun. It's relaxed. I get to meet so many different kinds of artists. Usually I get kind of in a bubble with the other mainstream or superhero artists, and
we'll talk about that in a bit.
But here there's just such a wide diversity of creators, and I love that. It inspires me. It starts making me feel like my own storytelling and drawing is kind of stale because there's so many people doing so many experimental things. And I meet somebody like Bruno Redondo who's just pushing the limits of his storytelling, and I'm like, oh, I want to do more things like that. So it's very inspiring.
I brought work by 3 artists to get signed. I've got your Lazarus books, which are on display. I'll come back to that as well, but introduced to Lazarus by my other half. I'll get back to that. Bruno. Yep. And Dave McKean as well. The only 3. I mean, and it's great that we have this festival which brings such diverse creators and creators and artists that are willing, like you say, to push a little bit more of a boundary and go a little bit beyond the standard 4, 8, 9 panel sort of superhero grid work.
Yeah,
going a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
at play.
I've done European festivals before. And they are more like this generally, but most of the cons that I've been to have been American cons, and it's just all about money. And so it's nice to come somewhere where it's about art. I mean, not to be kind of snooty. I mean, it is my job and it's how I make a living, but it's nice to say, oh yeah, we're artists. We're creating something and challenging ourselves. It's
highlights nice. That you've come across. If not just this year, because I know, like I say, it's a case of getting out and sort of like seeing who's out and about, but highlights the last couple of years or the years that you've gone around the Lakes Festival, yeah.
Oh, Gigi Cavanago, who is now, my favorite artist in comics. He's just an amazing, amazing, amazing artist. I was familiar with Bruno Redondo's work, but didn't know that it was Bruno Redondo until I got here, and Sean told me it's the guy who does Nightwing, or maybe I guess he told me I'm the guy who does Nightwing, and I was like, oh, I've got some Nightwing images that I downloaded on my computer for inspiration. I wonder if it's you. And I looked it up, and sure enough, it was. So before I'd met him, I was downloading a bunch of his work without even realizing who he was. His covers are beautiful and inspire me on my own covers. So a lot of times when I'm working on covers and choosing colors, I'm looking at images online or on my computer to get ideas, and his are always at the top of the list. So yeah, Bruno and Jorge, I really like both. This year, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Juanjo, who does Black Sod.
Yeah.
I've been a huge Black Sod fan for years. I didn't even know he was coming.
I'm so glad that you actually had to try to pronounce it, because I would know. I have still no idea how to pronounce it.
I think it's Juanjo. But he said when he introduces himself, he says it so fast, I don't realize.
There was someone who posted one of the Marvel bullpens where it was like a shortcut of how to pronounce, Sienkiewicz, and actually writing out the words. And so I wish there was one for in 2024 for modern creators now. Yeah. So at least then we'd have an idea of how to pronounce the names.
Yeah, I don't even try. I just say, I love your work. That's all I say.
Run the word.
Yeah, that's all I say. I've been a big fan of his, but I mean, I can't even think of all the people from over the years that I've run into whose work I like here. But I don't get to the comic book store much. There's not a comic book store in Shrewsbury.
No.
And before that, I lived
I find it always bizarre.
I know. I lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and there were comic book stores, but none near where I lived. And my wife used to manage a comic book store, and my child is a huge comic book fan. And so they were how I got all my comics. And since she stopped managing the store and my child no longer is an adult now, I didn't have a source for comics. And so it was kind of nice to get out. I went and bought a bunch of books yesterday. I've got a huge bag of books to take home on the train tomorrow.
I know that when you first started, superhero comics were not your bag. It wasn't something that really kind of floated your boat. Is it something that you've grown to love, superhero comics? Are like the big two, what people would consider a superhero comic?
I don't know about love, but I've grown to appreciate them. I was young and snooty when I first started, and thought I was.
It's okay. As you get older, we all just get snooty again. We just it goes in an arc.
I think I've gotten a bit more open-minded. I hope I have. I realized that I was being a bit close-minded about them, and I can see the appeal of them. They're not anything I want to go back to drawing on a regular basis. Okay. I still prefer my grounded, sort of reality based. I mean, Lazarus is kind of an exception. It's sort of a superhero comic, but not really, and I kind of like that about it. It's not full on super heroics.
It's still breaking the borders. It's kind of it's not just constrained by that genre.
Right. I mean, Greg's got an agenda that's so much more than that.
Sure.
With the writing and really this book is Greg's baby. It's his vision. And I feel like it's my job just to sort of translate that vision onto the page.
Okay.
And so, but I do like this. This is about as superhero as I like right now.
When it came to getting into the industry, because I mean, when I've done my research on you, when I've read about you, it kind of seems that you started with superhero books, or with DC and
with Vertigo actually.
With Vertigo,
well, actually, there were some things I did before that.
So. But that was the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to introduce yourself to somebody. You still have to kind of get your foot in the door. How did that happen? Who were the first, especially coming from the design background? What was the translation?
Well, I really didn't do design. That was what I started at university for, but I hated it. Just absolutely, I hated working for clients, and everything was reviewed by a committee, and nobody agreed, and they gave you many different directions, and I hated it. And so the only job I had after university was I worked in the advertising department of a gardening center.
Okay.
And so that was as design as I got.
How long did that last?
It lasted a couple years, but I was drawing comics on the side, and I'd kind of let it slide.
So who did which door did the envelope get slid under? And
well, I started. I guess I got serious about it when I was doing that job that I hated, and I was like, I think I want to go ahead and draw my own comic. And I'd seen stuff this was the mid 80s, and so there were all these great black and white independently published comics that were coming out, and I'd seen superhero comics. I was like, I can't draw like that. I don't draw like those guys draw. But then I saw these indie comics coming out, and I loved those. And I was actually waiting in line to get an autograph at a convention, and the line stretched in front of the table for Caliber Press.
Aye.
And Guy Davis, who at the time was drawing a book called Baker Street, and the publisher were standing there, and they were like, they saw I had a portfolio with me, and they asked to see it. So I showed it to them, and that night, Gary Reed, the publisher, said, "We want to publish it." And I mean, it was crap. I was writing it. I had no idea what I was doing with the drawing, and I'm forever grateful that they did that. And then Dean Motter saw it, and who writes Mr. X and stuff. And Dean at the time was an art director for a company that had bought the rights to do some adaptations of Raymond Chandler novels and short stories. And they asked me to do that, and I quit my day job, and that's been it. Dean then went on to DC and Vertigo and did Terminal City, and I had been showing my work to people at Vertigo for a couple of years, and it was always, "Oh, we like it, but we don't really have anything for you." And Dean had a lunch meeting with Shelley Bond, who was the editor on Terminal City, and said, "I want this guy Michael Lark to draw it." And Shelley called me, and the next day I started working for DC, and that's been it ever since.
I'm a friend of Shelley's. She has a fantastic barometer for when it comes to just finding new talent, and she will absolutely swing the bat for someone.
She did. She went to bat for me in a huge way. Shelley was a great editor for a newcomer to have. She was so good about.
I was just going to say, what did you learn from Shelley when it came to...
It's funny. The one thing that I learned from Shelley, though, that I think of every single day, and she'd probably laugh if she heard this, but I had a tendency to make all the heads the same size on my page. I said, "No, make the heads different sizes." But, Shelley never, ever said, "You're doing this wrong, doing something wrong." Shelley just always told me all the things I was doing right, and which, of course, made me do them more,
Nice.
you know? And Shelley was gifted in that way. She still is, I'm sure. As an editor, that was exactly what I needed as a young artist who had no idea how to draw comics.
Right.
I mean, I didn't even grow up reading comics. I didn't start until I was in university and saw those black and white books because I just wasn't a fan of superheroes.
True.
And but then I saw stuff like Love and Rockets and Eddie Current, and
Straight
those
Bullets.
were big ones. Yep. Stray Bullets, I think, came a little bit later.
Okay.
But, Guy Davis's Baker Street I loved. And, there were books coming out from Caliber and slave labor graphics and things like that I just loved. And there were artists who were doing things like, well, if this guy can do it, I think I can. Which was so naive and... kind of egotistical of me, really, because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't realize until later that I had no idea what I was doing. It was kind of nice to not know the rules and just kind of go in there and wing it.
Nice.
But
I mean, you find with most comic book artists, they worship at the altar of those that have come before. So they very much look at your classic golden and silver age,
which I've never seen.
That's the thing. Yeah, you could definitely see that there isn't that kind of. I'm not going to say that there isn't that lineage that you're drawing from, but at least then you're not beholden to that.
Well, it's almost like if if it was a musician who, all they heard were modern punk bands, and they were like, "We're a punk band," and they've never gone back and listened to the Clash or the Pistols or something, that's kind of how I was. I mean, the first person who was like, "Oh, you must like Alex Toth," I'm like, "Who?" Which now I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
I'm just going to say, have you gone back to because I wanted to ask this about with Jorge when it comes to the fact that he's done Danger Street with Tom King. That's a deep cut. I mean, we're talking some real kind of not B-list, but real low tier characters from the DC vaults. You kind of have to know something.
I think I won't speak for him, but for me, it was I had to learn a lot as I was going. Yeah, I mean, there were times where I was asked to draw characters that I had no idea who they were, and I mean that lasted for a long time. When I did the
Fake It Till You Make It.
When I did the Grim Hunt Spider-Man story arc, I wasn't familiar with Kraven the Hunter at all. I had no idea who Craven the Hunter was, which, I mean, that's probably sacrilege to a lot of people. But
that's why you have an editor.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, so he looks like a muscly Freddie Mercury wearing a lion's head. Cool. Got it.
Well, now I'm not going to be able to not picture.
No, you won't. That's what it is.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. You'll enjoy it more.
I probably will not be able to enjoy the film more now that I've got that image in my head.
Yeah.
Okay. Meeting Greg, how did that all come about?
That was through Ed Brubaker, who, Ed was working with Shelley on Scene of the Crime, and at that point, Shelley was just my biggest advocate, and she wanted me to draw Scene of the Crime. So while we were working on that, Ed and Greg were developing Gotham Central, and Ed just mentioned it to me that they were working on this thing, and he told me what it was, and I was like, oh my God, I want to draw that. And I had other stuff in the pipeline already, and they were so kind to wait for me to finish the other stuff I had to do.
Nice.
And I'm so glad they did, because I'm so proud of that book. I think that it was, again, that was my kind of superhero book. It was street level. It wasn't all about the superheroics at all. It was about the people in Gotham City.
So when did the conversations about Lazarus start?
Well, I had left Gotham Central in DC and was doing work with Ed at Marvel and with other people at Marvel. And Greg came in and wrote a story arc of Daredevil at one point, or at least co-wrote it. I can't remember.
Co-wrote.
The Dakota North story. And, Greg and I had just stayed in touch and had always been friends. And we had been talking about something to do, and he had some ideas, and none of them had made me go, oh, yeah, I can't even remember what they were. And he was passing through town on a book signing tour, and we went out to dinner, and he described for me the first scene in Lazarus #1. And I was just, that's the book I want to draw. I'm in. I want to draw that book. And that's been it. And
the rest, as you say, is history. With Lazarus, I know that when reviewers, certainly of the first initial series, and they talked about the strength of the world building, and I know that wasn't the quote that I read was, you felt that was not necessarily important, or at least not as important as you felt. People were overblowing the whole idea of world building. Well, no, I think the world building is obviously important. It's part of the story.
For me, though, the focus is on the characters.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the story of that world. It's the story of Forever Carlyle and some of the people around her. It's not the story of the world. The world is just there so that we can tell her story.
Sure. I mean, if anything, a number of people have made the comparison, and I can make it, maybe for a slightly different reason, of Game of Thrones, in very much that whole idea that people talk about, we're building this massive world of Westeros, of Game of Thrones. The world of Game of Thrones is not the world of Game of Thrones, it's the characters of Game of Thrones. Well, and that's very much what you have with Lazarus. You have these very strong, rich characters that are moving like chess pieces around a rather in-depth world, chessboard.
Right, and it's a coming of age story in a way. I mean, and as we've expanded the characters, there's been more added to that. There's so much more to it than, okay, here's this world. And I understand why people are into that. And Greg puts a lot of work into that.
Sure.
He knows the whole history of that world and everything about it. I don't immerse myself in that the way he does. I only want to know.
Do you feel you need to?
No, I only want to know what's going to be important to the characters.
Okay.
And there are times where it is important to where I'm drawing things. And, I talk to friends who are in comics who work much, much faster than I do. And I always start to feel, I spend too much time on backgrounds. I focus on details too much. But they are important to this story.
Cool.
And I have to. And that does make it a more labor-intensive project to work on. This is the slowest I've ever drawn anything. But, Greg will send me a script and say, like for issue #2, I remember the script said, Forever's riding a badass motorcycle through the desert. And I'm like, Greg, what does that even mean? Is it electric? Is it gas? What does that even mean? I have no idea, which, Greg was like, I didn't even think I had to think about that. And then he realized he did.
It's the visuals. That's your job.
Yeah, kind of. But, Greg's fond of saying, you'll figure it out in the script. He was like, it's blah, 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 blah. Michael, you'll figure it out. So I was like, ah. But, I had to say, we had to get on the phone and discuss, what is this motorcycle in this world? In this world, what is a badass motorcycle?
Sure.
And that's just one example of the many, many, many questions he gets every issue. Usually I read the script, I'm like, oh, this is great, love it. And then as I work on it, he gets more and more and more questions.
Yeah.
To where, he probably has to go back and reread a script he wrote a couple months ago to answer them, because he's forgotten himself by that point.
I was thinking about this certainly when I was watching Blade Runner, and it does seem with speculative fiction and some sci-fi that there's a kind of linear timeline where it kind of like skews.
Yeah.
And that's where we then see where the actual world that we're reading about. So, for example, with Blade Runner, something happened in 1984, and then it just went off. It's almost like normal history, and then we just sort of like split off. With Lazarus and with the certainly the artwork that you put forward, where do you see where the kind of like timeline skewed off? It's
somewhere in the near future. I mean, everything that we've done is kind of like, okay, if we take what's happening now and push it to its extreme. I mean, it's the world of Lazarus is feudalism, essentially. I mean, it's kind of like the Middle Ages all over again. It's, these families.
I think what I meant was, say, for example, with Lazarus, it's not a case of, we had our normal timeline up to 1986, and then all of a sudden the families appeared. This is something with the Lazarus world, and with what Greg's clearly doing, is we're talking like from 18th century, 19th century. It's something that's built up slowly, that there's a real kind of bedrock to it. You know what I mean? It's not something that just suddenly went bing.
Yeah, no. I think that's more Greg than me.
Yeah.
I mean, in the first hardback, there's a timeline of all the events that led up to where the story begins, and maybe beyond a little bit. I don't know. And I know Greg in his head has a timeline. I know that.
Do you certainly for the visuals and for your artwork, and where you feel that the kind of the world sits on a visual kind of
what I end up doing most of the time for any kind of technology or any kind of vehicles, things like that, it's always I do research on what is being developed now,
right?
Like the kind of things that, like the concepts now, and I'm saying, okay, like all the aircraft, I don't, if you notice, most of them are vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, and so I do a lot of, okay, what are concept aircraft that the Air Force is developing right now, and they may never appear, but it's the concepts that they've got now of what they want to do in the future, and that's what we use as our jumping off point.
Fair enough.
That's what I use as my jumping off point.
When it comes to your art, how disposable is it for you, as in revisiting tradebacks, and when you're looking at old issues, is it something that you can just go, okay, it's done, I sent it to the editor, let it fly, it becomes somebody else's, it becomes the other person to read? Can you look at your work and go, oh, you know what, I could go back in and just do something with that. I could have done something there. I can change something there.
Oh, every single panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, every single one. I mean, that I think is just the curse of being an artist. I mean, I always.
So it's not the past is the past. It's done. It's in print.
It has to be at some point. I mean, you have to let it go.
Yeah.
Being an American, I'm a baseball fan, and a great hitter in baseball fails 70% of the time.
Okay.
And I kind of have to tell myself that. Okay, if I drew 6 panels and I like 2 of them, I'm great. That's a great day. It's rare that I've done a page where I like every panel on the page. Okay. I mean, I can't even think of a time in the last few years where that's happened. Okay. Yesterday I was doing sketches at the convention and they were coming out really good. And my wife and I have been talking about it. It's like, I liked every sketch I did yesterday. That's really weird. That's very weird. There's something in the air here, I guess.
Clearly.
So, I mean, yeah, you have to let it go. But when you decided to become an artist, and make that your life, you've kind of embarked on a journey that has no destination. It will never be as good as you see in your head.
Sure.
And some of us are better than others at just saying, okay, it's never going to be as good, just let it go. Like, Sean Phillips and I talk about that a lot. I'm constantly talking to, because Sean's fast. He's super fast. He draws, hundreds of pages a year. And I'm, maybe half that speed at best. And, I'm constantly asking Sean how he does it. And he just seems to have a really healthy, like, it's time to let it go. Just let it go. And I'm not as I'm not as good about that as he is. I'm not as healthy about that as he is, I think.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask a question which possibly would be more suited for Greg, but I'm going to ask yourself as well. We're talking about Lazarus as very much a treatise on capitalism, on the class structure, not just in America, on a global scale. Yeah. When you first started Lazarus, you could say that the enemy was pretty much well defined. It was capitalism, it was the corporations, this is family as corporations.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. We're now in 2024, and over the period of Lazarus coming out, the target seems to have changed, and it's now individuals who are the more distinct threat, the heads of those corporations, the individual, the celebrity of the
sort of like Elon Musk.
Yeah. The target's changed. Do you feel that's possibly changed how you and Greg have taken on Lazarus and how you approach the book?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, look at the Trump family. Mm-hmm. Got,
I'd rather not, but
fucking
okay.
Jared Kushner, that weird marionette creature. He's part of the family. Careful,
I have seen him casting one or two of your issues. He says one or two characters that could easily be that.
Yeah, to me, the Carlisle family, at least the way they started out, were very much like the Trump family. And the Trump family hadn't come into the picture really as what they were. I mean, he was still just a buffoon reality TV star, which that is all he is. But, the family and all that stuff hadn't become a thing. And now they're definitely more in the spotlight. And we almost feel as if what we were speculatively doing with Lazarus kind of became reality in a frightening way.
Or reality became your book.
Yeah, exactly.
The other way.
And so I don't think the target has changed. We're working on the final 20 issues of the book right now.
Oh, right.
And
you jumped ahead of a question there.
Yeah.
That was coming
20
out.
more issues coming, starting in the spring 2025. And I lost my train of thought.
Nah, don't worry about it.
Doesn't matter.
You
can edit that.
Nah, I'm not editing anything. Are you kidding?
Okay.
Are you kidding? I was going to. Now I've lost my train of thought now.
Yeah.
But it was very much about the where you felt the story had evolved and how you felt that Greg's telling of the story.
Yes. Well, there are definitely family personalities, family head personalities that are becoming more. It's like, okay, that's the villain of the story.
Right.
But even with that, something that Greg and I talked about very early on in this, the first draft of the first issue, I absolutely hated every single character in it. I was like, I can't draw these people. I don't want to live in this world. I'm not going to draw them. They were just villains. And I was like, even Elon Musk, for all his assholeness, thinks that what he's doing is right. Even though he's wrong. And that's not true, on some level he thinks what he's doing is right. He's not just a troll. And, so even I say they're villains, but they think that they're saving the world.
Sure.
They think they're making things right. And that was really important to me, that we not be in a black and white world.
Yeah.
It's a very gray world.
Okay. You've kind of answered a little bit of the question there, but let's have a little bit more of a detail. You say a final arc,
yes.
Final storylines, I'm guessing written already, or where are we at with...
I don't know. I don't know how much of it's written.
We're at the tail end of September 2024.
Yes, that's where we are now. I am 6 issues in on drawing it, so we're well ahead. The first story arc is complete.
So
we're starting
6 out of how many issues we're talking?
20. 6 out of 20.
Okay.
And so next year, in the spring or early summer at some point, in the spring, the next hardback is coming out, which is going to collect the last 2 story arcs. We've been waiting until we were ready to start publishing again, and banking some issues. And then we're going to do 20 issues, and we're doing our best to do them monthly, every month. The plan right now is, like the first 6 issues, then a month off, then the trade comes out, then a month off, and then we're back to monthly again for the next story arc. And we're going to do that until we've got 4 story arcs to finish.
Okay. The first, I'd say 3-4 trades that we've got here were very character driven. It's all about the machinations of the world. We kind of hit lockdown and pandemic around issue 4. Collection 4, and that's when things sort of like really kind of ramps up in terms of action, with the war, with the real big world conflict of Lazarus. Mm-hmm. Was that something that you felt that the pandemic kind of like gave you, and also what's that now tailed off into the later issues where we go?
No, I don't think the pandemic really affected the story at all. I believe that if you go back and look at the timeline that Greg did in the first hardback, there was a pandemic. But he was,
that boy he just predicted a lot.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. No, I don't think it really affected the storyline. We'd pretty much gotten through most of the kind of middle act of the story by the time the pandemic hit. In fact, the pandemic is part of why we took as long a break as we did.
Sure.
As an artist, as a comics artist, the pandemic was ideal. Because
I
was born for that. I was born to stay home every day. There were other things that happened during the pandemic with family, personally,
sure,
with both me and Greg, that that slowed down the production a bit. Mostly me. I'm the reason that there's been such a long break. But I don't think it really affected the story.
Quantity. It's just slow and steady.
It's slow and steady. That's the key. Yeah, it's slow. I've got down. Steady. I kind of lost the plot on for a bit. But like I said, there were things that happened personally and family-wise and stuff that threw spanners in the works as well.
Okay. And I know that we've had issues and we've got guest artists throughout this one. The final art, it's all you.
Yeah, we only had the one bit of guest artists, and that was always intended to be Greg, I was kind of the driving factor behind that. I was like, let's do side stories about some of the other Lazarus characters, and Greg ended up making those more a part of the overall plot than I thought he was going to, and that actually became more. We actually intended that to be a little bit of a break, and it became more work than either of us intended, and it was kind of on some levels for us, it was a failed experiment. We just kind of wanted to see what would happen in this world with other people kind of taking a stab at it. And we kind of continued that with the short stories that were in the middle act, which were really fun. And we enjoyed that much more. That was a lot of fun.
Okay. Do you see how you are going to feel when that final issue is done and Lazarus is complete in front of you, do you feel that it's something you can let go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's time.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's
Careful, that's usually the train. Just
yeah. No, it's been 10 years that I've been working on this, and I'm, as much as I love drawing this world, and as much as I am, I'm the visual part of it, and I think that's indispensable. So I would never say, okay, that's it, I'm gone, because I don't think Lazarus would exist if I did that. Greg is perfectly capable of continuing on without me if he wanted to, but. We haven't had a big enough fight yet for that to happen. We're like an old married couple. We have our spats, but we're both in this for the long haul. And again, like I say, this is Greg's vision, and I feel like it's my job.
Do you feel that from reading what you're getting from Greg, he's ready for it to as a complete piece?
I think what happened was we finished the second act, and we knew that was the second act. We knew we were going to begin on the final act of the overall story. But I think the reality hit Greg, because he very much had to sit down. He's given me different numbers for how many issues we'd have left.
Right.
Until finally we were like, okay, we've got to set a publication schedule now, or it's time. And then he had to actually sit down and say, okay, how many issues is it going to take me to tell this story? And that was when we finally got to the final number of 20 issues. It's been everything from as few as 7 to more than that. And it was like, it's going to be 20 issues. That's what it's going to take to finish the story and do it justice.
Yeah.
Because he's got a lot of balls he's juggling at this point. There are so many subplots, and there are so many characters that I think that he feels very attached to, and they're his children. There are some characters he was planning on killing, but I was like, no, I love that character, please don't kill them. And he was like, oh, all right. And now they become really important to the plot. Greg loves to kill his characters. He's awful. He is not a benevolent god.
Which ones have you saved? Which of the characters he saved?
I don't think it's fair to say. He's killed some characters.
Sorry, I'm now picturing Greg going, okay, here's right.
Oh, he's totally holding guns to all of their heads. Yes, that's what he does. But that's what makes good storytelling.
Sure.
It's like, I guess it's fair to say Sonia Bittner, another one of the Lazaruses, he was going to kill her. And I was like, I love Sonia so much. She's one of my favorite characters. Please don't kill Sonia. And Sonia has become integral to the last act now, which I can't imagine the last act being the way it's going to be had she not been there.
Oh, okay.
So I think that, Greg he knows where the final destination of the journey is, but he really doesn't know what route he's going to take to get there until he's there. Until he comes to that turning, he doesn't know that he's going to turn there. And so I think for him, that was probably a pleasant surprise. And it made me happy because that's a character I really, really love. I love everything about her. She's so fun to draw. She's so different from Forever, where Forever is confident, or at least appears confident and very, and aggressive. Sonia is kind of, a little more meek and shy and socially awkward, and she's very fun to draw. Love her.
One of my wife's favourites. It wasn't me that picked up the Lazarus from the shelf. It was Caroline, it was my wife, that picked up the book. She picked up the first issue. I think it was even also recommended to her by the comic book shop. Okay in Leeds, shout out to you. At which point she was halfway through and said, you have to read this. There seems to be a consistent thread when I've spoken to people about Lazarus. It's a real word of mouth. It's someone that's someone falls in love with this. So it's very much like the original Game of Thrones books. It's very much like those really strong worlds where people have kind of fallen in love with it and then it's spread the word. So people down in the tent over the last couple of days, is it been those that have been from the start, or is it people who have just kind of been introduced to it over the last couple of years?
Well, there was one couple that came up, and one of them said, when we first started dating, my wife recommended this to me, and
does there seem to be a lot of things like my wife recommended, or my girlfriend recommended? Where's the
my spouse?
My spouse. Okay.
And the spouse spouse said, yeah, and she married me anyway. So, it's a lot of word of mouth like that. But, I don't really ask, and only if people tell me.
Sure.
But I get just as many people who, especially in Europe, for whatever reason, I get Daredevil fans.
Right, okay.
Daredevil and Captain America fans, and, my Marvel work. So, I'm just glad that anybody's reading my stuff. I don't really ask, but we do get a lot of what you just said, where somebody recommended it and they fell in love with it.
Do you feel that Lazarus will be the thing in brackets in the first line of your obituary?
Well, because I did it for so long, but I think Gotham Central was a big deal for us. Greg and I are absurdly proud of the work we did.
That's where I came in.
Yeah, Greg and I are absurdly proud of the Half a Life story arc of Gotham Central. Greg just loves Renee Montoya, and that was a big deal for us. And we felt like I've had more people say, I came out after reading that story and realized how important it was to not live that secret life anymore. And man, that's huge. You touch someone's life that way.
Sure.
In a way that I didn't expect. Greg was supposed to do it the year after that came out, the Gays and Lesbians in Comics panel at San Diego, which is a big, big deal. Greg was supposed to do it, but he had to leave for whatever reason. He said, Michael, you go do it. It'll be good. And I was like, I can't even talk about this. And that was one of the best experiences of my life. I got so much positive feedback. I had so many people tell me how much that touched their lives. And that, I'm glad when people say, I like your artwork, and we love Lazarus, or we love this, or we love that. And I'm really glad about that. But to have someone say, my life changed because of something you did. That's crazy. Wow. I don't feel like I deserve that, that definitely triggers my imposter syndrome. I'm this weird little straight white guy, to have my life touch somebody's life like that who knows struggles that I'll never know is a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Lazarus comes to a close. Do you have anything lined up? What's kind of like next for Michael Lark?
20 issues is a long time for me.
Yeah.
And so, at least through 2025, I know I'm going to be doing this. And I've started putting out feelers in a couple different places. I've got a couple things I'd like to do. It's just
anybody you'd like to work with?
There are a few people.
Yeah.
I would.
Who's on the wish list?
Oh, I don't know that I can say.
Yes, you can.
No, I'm not going to say right now. I'm not going to say right now because I've talked to them, and I don't want to.
No saying into existence.
Yeah, no. Obviously, I love working with Greg, and there are other people. Other people I've worked with in the past that I'd love to work with again. There are people that I've since become friends with in the industry that we seem to think along the same lines that I wouldn't mind working with. And, I'd love to go back. I started out my career doing an adaptation of an old detective novel, and I would love to go back and do something like that again. And I've talked to people about doing that. So, that would be just me, myself, and I. Yeah. I would do everything on the book at that point. And I'd love to do that. I would love to have that kind of control again and not have to answer to anybody else.
So no House of X ongoing, no X-Men ongoing.
I don't see myself going back to doing anything at Marvel or DC. I'm a huge advocate of creator-owned and creator rights. I think that Marvel and DC exploit the artists and the writers.
It's a machine.
It is. And we agree to do that when we work for them. We agree to say, okay, anything I create for you is yours. And that's fine. At the time that I did it, that was the only way to make a comfortable living doing comics. But it's different now. At least for those of us who've established our names a bit, I can work for Image and make a living. And, their model is so different from Marvel and DC's. I don't understand how I can do a book for Image. And, our monthlies, we usually lose some money on the monthlies. But by the time the hardbacks come out, we've usually made it up. And we're actually making a profit. And I don't understand how DC and Marvel can pay the talent so little and charge the customer so much and still be putting ads in the books and things like that. And it's
you're gonna have to ask Bruno.
It's not fair. It's not right. And I'm not going to say anything to like Bruno or Jorge, but I'm like, when are you guys going to do some creator-owned stuff? Like, you should own it. It should be yours, and not to be mercenary and commercial about it, but it was such an eye opener with Lazarus, where we own everything. We're responsible for the international rights when it's published internationally, and we get paid for that. Marvel and PC, we don't get paid for that.
Film rights. I'm just going to say what's next for Lazarus in terms of anything beyond the printed page?
That is...
certainly the first two arcs, it's geared up for a big screen, kind of widescreen kind of...
We've sold the rights multiple times, and Greg was very deep in development of it. We got pretty far in development with Amazon, but ultimately they just chose to pass on it. And, I look at, Sean Phillips and Ed Brubaker with Criminal. It's been 15 years since they did Criminal, and it's just now getting made into a TV series. I have learned not to take any hopes on
I'm just going to say, we'll
Hollywood.
have a chat with you in about 5-10 years' time then.
Hollywood to me is the most frustrating. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I know that a lot of writers are like, oh, I want to work in Hollywood, want to do more stuff like that. And I'm like, no, thank you. When we first negotiated this, I was kind of excited to be involved. And the longer it went on, the less I wanted to be involved. Because that's a machine that is way too big for me. It just chews people up and spits them out. And, I know that Ed is, he's show running Criminal. He did show running on the Batman animated series and stuff. And I talked to Sean, and Sean's like, I used to get the emails during work hours on the West Coast. Now I get them where they're coming in at midnight, 2 a.m. on the West Coast. So Ed's having to put in some really, really long days to just be able to do comics. And that I don't know that there's enough money to make me want to do that. I as long as I can pay my bills, I'm happy.
Sounds like a plan. I think the question I wanted to wrap up on, because I know that before the design course, was it for music? Was it a music course? What is on the Lazarus soundtrack? What is if you can think of a couple of bands, what kind of sets the soundtrack up for Lazarus? What gets played when you do you have a soundtrack when you actually?
No, I don't. I've been working on it for so long. I would be pretty limited if I was staying on a few things. No, I put on music depending on my mood.
Okay.
Gosh, that's a hard question that I've never really thought of. I don't know. I think it would be mostly... I picture kind of industrial, sort of electronic music, I think, would be kind of the most...
Well, Nine Inch Nails are already doing Tron, so they've gone Disney. So
that's kind of what I'm picturing, I think, though, is kind of more like angry Nine Inch Nails type of music. That kind of angry, down... kind of cranky music, maybe a little Jesus and Mary chain, kind of noisy sort of stuff like that is probably what I would picture.
Okay.
But also, I'm old. I don't like much new music anymore. So.
I feel it on that one.
I know. My kid plays music for me, and I'm like, this is weird, and I realize I sound like an old person. So.
Well, I'm not asking if you then head off and kind of put together a Spotify playlist for Lazarus, because that would be far too much time and hard work, especially when you've got more books to do and more artwork to produce. So I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of Lakes, and then crack on with Lazarus, which we're all really looking forward to seeing.
I got plans for what I got to do next week. I got a busy week ahead.
Sounds like it.
Already.
Thank you.
So,
Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Excellent.
All right.